And so what's going to happen with this series, or what is happening with this series, is that we have 7 different concert programs. Each one comes from a different country, a different culture, a different time period, and each one has a dish associated with it that Rob will teach you how to make. You can make the food,
Wow.
then enjoy it as a concert in your home.
Robert,
Hey, Petra, how are you?
I'm finding you.
Doing really well. Good to see you.
Lovely to see you too. The last time we spoke was in summer
Yeah.
last year, and you had this wonderful educational project that you did. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's been a long time since then, hasn't it? There's been a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that's gone on since last time we spoke.
Yeah. Now I've been watching your Windsor. It's the Windsor Orchestra.
Yep, our Windsor Symphony Orchestra.
Mm.
Yep.
Now I've been following you, and I subscribe to your newsletter as well. So I kind of know what's going on there.
Oh, fantastic! You're in the know.
I'm in the know. Yeah.
That's great.
But the last time we spoke, you told me about this wonderful project that you are doing now. I'm very excited to hear about this.
So it's I'll tell you how it sort of began. This
Yeah.
actually began in the middle of COVID last season. We started to think about, we wanted to create a digital concert series, but we wanted to create an experience for people to have at home other than just sitting around the TV and watching a concert. And so one of the things that dawned on us was that one of the aspects that brings families and people together is food, not just music, but food. And that each of these concerts took place in a certain time and location and a certain sort of culture. And wouldn't it be fun if people could eat the food that came from the time and the culture that the music came from, to kind of give another dimension of the music?
Oh.
So we have in town here in Windsor, Ontario, where I'm located right now, we have an historian. He's a history professor at the University of Windsor. His name is Dr. Rob Nelson. He also happens to be an amazing chef, and he has a particular connection to historical dishes and food. It's like his specialty. He does this, he goes and speaks on this in all over the world, actually. So we called him up and we partnered with him. And so what's going to happen with this series, or what is happening with this series, is that we have 7 different concert programs. Each one comes from a different country, a different culture, a different time period, and each one has a dish associated with it that Rob will teach you how to make. You can make the food, then enjoy it as a concert in your home. And there are 7 of these. I've curated them in order, but you can watch them in any order you wish. If for instance, you decide tonight is my night for chicken frico, then watch that one first. I mean, each one has a different kind of food associated with it, or in some cases, a drink associated with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You thought of everything.
We're trying. You know, here in Ontario, we're currently in another quasi lockdown as the pandemic sort of rears its head again. And so people are, I think, ready to leave their homes, but realize that they can't quite do that in the way that they wish yet. And so again, what we hoped to do with this series is create an experience that people could share together with their family at home. So you and I last spoke in August. Since August, we recorded. So we started performing live this fall, which was amazing with live audience. But before we met with the live audience and rehearsed that particular program, we would record some of the music for this digital series. So we did double duty, September through December. And so by the end of December, we not only had performed 6 programs for live audience, but we had recorded 7 separate programs for this digital series that premieres on January 14th.
That's amazing. And you know, there's so many things that I want to ask you about this, but
sure.
So just explain to me. So for example, give me an example of one of the programs for it. Yeah.
Sure. So we are performed the opera La Serva Padrona. Now this is a chamber opera, an opera buffa, a comic opera written by Pergolesi, Giovanni Battista Pergolesi, in 1733 in Naples, Italy. This was kind of a big deal on a couple of levels. First of all, in 1732, there was an enormous earthquake in Naples. And so the theater couldn't be used, people were in disarray. By the time the end of 1733 came around, the theater was back in use. And so they commissioned Pergolesi to write this enormous dramatic opera in 3 big acts. In between, there were 2 intermissions, and they didn't want to let people just go willy-nilly anywhere. And so he wrote a comic opera in 2 parts that was meant just for the intermission. And that's what we performed. It's called La Sera Padrona. Now, it turns out that this opera, which is sort of slapstick and fun and uses all of the devices that you would expect in comic opera, was the first such comic opera, and it was the forefather of Marriage of Figaro and Barbara Seville and operas like that. So it made me think, well, what was prevalent? What would they eat in 1733? And what they would make are these, what they called pizza rustica or pizza cena. And it was a pizza that was this thick. You'd put it on the fire for 3 or 4 hours, and it was layers of cheese and meat and pastry dough. Now, there was no red sauce. Red sauce didn't come into play in Italy until the late 19th century. So this was 150 years before red sauce, right? Because tomatoes and red sauce actually come from North America, and that was an influence of North America on Italy. And so this is a pizza pie that is hearty and dense and really warm and perfect for the winter time. And so Rob Nelson teaches our audience how to make one of these pizza rustica. By the way, when you subscribe to this series, you also get a little mini recipe book. So you'll have all 7 of these recipes that you can use at any time, right? Like you can make them again if you like them, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one example. Another sort of fun example is that we're doing a concert. One of the programs features music of Mozart, Myslivacek, Czech composer, and Joseph Bologna. Now, Joseph Bologna was a Black 18th century composer who had the title of Chevalier de Saint-Georges. He was a famous fencer. In fact, he was probably the best fencing fencer in all of Europe in the 18th century. But he was also a violinist and a conductor and a composer. And he wrote a couple of symphonies, which we performed. But he caught the eye of Marie Antoinette, which apparently was not so hard to do. And so Marie Antoinette took a real liking to Joseph Bologna. And so she would invite him over to make music, to teach, to whatever. You know, they had this relationship. Well, one of the things that interested me and Rob about this sort of relationship is that likely they would have enjoyed some hot chocolate. Now, I actually had hot chocolate last night after dinner, and nowadays you just get a can, you put it in, and away you go. But in the mid 18th century, chocolate was so expensive, and what was really expensive was sugar. So people drank, Marie Antoinette drank her hot chocolate with no sugar. It was just hearty, like it was almost like coffee. And to sort of cut it a little bit, she'd add a little vodka to it. So Rob has this hot chocolate, 18th century hot chocolate recipe that you can enjoy while watching these concerts. Like Marie Antoinette likely would have been enjoying while she was watching these pieces being performed.
Wow. I mean, that's so, you know, and this is so interesting because it's so informative, you know, and it's really something that we don't think about or that we don't think of going to read about unless you really are interested in. But now you bring all these things, these elements together.
Well, you know, Petra, one thing that was so important to me was to build context. And this has always been important to me. Like when you hear a piece of music, it's important to know what culture does it come from? What was the composer thinking? What were the influences? And so really what we're doing is building concentric rings around the piece of music so that you get more context of what the world was like when these pieces were first performed.
Yeah. But now that you're saying that, this is exactly what I found, and this is exactly why I keep talking to artists, because there are so many things I didn't know, and it's because I'm not a musician, and you have the knowledge not just about the music, but of course you have the knowledge about the history of the music, or the background of the music and the composer. And the moment musicians start talking about that, they open your eyes to, or they open your ears to listen to it differently, to see the music differently, think of the composer differently. And I think going to a concert and having a background of that, or even at a concert, I mean, I wonder how many people really go and study something before they go to a concert. But at the concert, just to hear something, like just one little phrase can make you think or experience the music differently.
Yes, I agree. It's all about context, right? Like it's all about putting it in context. And I'll be honest with you, being a musician, it's not that I know these things, it's that they become curiosities to me, and then I go find out about these things. And that's what I love so much about my job and about my career and about my life, is that it never would have dawned on me, had I not performed Joseph Bologna's symphonies, what Marie Antoinette drank. Like it just never.
Yeah.
I mean, who thinks about that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we have, there are 7 of those pairings.
That's amazing. And another thing is, I spoke to a chef in last year, the end of last year, because what I discovered also in this time, and by talking to artists who were in lockdown, that a lot of people started cooking. If I asked, so what did you do apart from practicing or playing? And then, I started cooking, or I started baking, or so on. And I realized that's actually what we don't think about. It's also a form of art. It's also baking is creating, and cooking, and it's all creative things that we do without thinking that it is actually art. So now that you talk about, you work now with another artist in another field, and that is in cooking,
Yeah, culinary arts, absolutely.
Culinary arts, yeah.
Yes, no question. And that sort of creativity is very interesting. And Rob, as you'll see when you watch these videos, Rob is he's a very creative spirit, and he's very interested in kind of how these things sort of inspire each other. For instance, we're doing a concert that features a music by Samuel Collars Taylor, whose mom was English. He grew up in England, but his dad was from Sierra Leone. So Rob found a recipe that was Sierra Leone inspired, which is an okra seafood stew, which I mean, I am not a big okra fan, I will be honest, but when I watched him make this, I thought I could not only eat that looks delicious. But what's interesting about that is, personally, having grown up in the southern United States, I was familiar with this sort of food based on New Orleans and the Deep South, and the sort of African influences that came to the United States through slavery, and we ended up with that sort of aspect of food. And so it's kind of this sort of connection, over the ocean and around the world, that were brought together by food. It's really quite extraordinary. We're also doing a piece that is inspired by the piece of music is inspired by a poet named Charles G.D. Roberts, who is from New Brunswick, from the province of New Brunswick. And so the piece was commissioned by the New Brunswick Symphony originally, and the composer, Christine Donkin, Canadian composer, was asked to use poetry to inspire the music, which was easy for her to do. It was something she's very interested in. So she used these 4 poems by Charles G.D. Roberts, each one very evocative, and she created this piece of music. So Rob shared with us a recipe for a New Brunswick stew type of food. It's called chicken frico, and it's really sort of chicken and dumplings, but it has its origins in southern France because of the French and how they settled in eastern Canada. And so this chicken frico was a real sort of peasant dish that French people would eat, 200 years ago, and it sort of lasted through the years and made it through as this chicken frico dish. Right. So we've got all of these sort of interconnections across the ocean that I think are really quite fascinating, and they shrink the size of the world. We think, especially in North America, okay, we're performing music by composers from Western Europe, and this is a culture that's far from us, and it's a very different culture. But it's not so. I mean, there's so many tentacles that sort of reach across back and forth. As I mentioned earlier, who'd have thunk that tomatoes would have come from North America and inspired Italian food to include tomato sauce in the late 19th century?
Yeah.
It
And
seems very Italian to
yeah,
me when you think of
it,
tomato
it
sauce, right?
exactly. I would never have thought that. Yeah, I just assumed that it comes from Italy.
No,
But Robert, it would have been so nice if you did something South African.
I
I could just,
know,
I
I
can see
know.
a bobotie dish coming up there.
Yes,
But yeah, so this is, but this is how we connect the world through art. This is what I
yeah,
see. That is what I see all the time. Is
yeah,
how everywhere, when you start talking about art and you see how people just come together and work together and interested in each other and interested in different forms of art, because I
yeah.
think this inspires. I believe that every form of art inspires the other, and this is wonderful what you are doing.
It was a labor of love and a lot of fun to put together, and very inspiring for us, for me, for Rob, for the musicians, this idea of how it sort of all comes together. And this is for us, um, it's the middle of a very cold winter. People like to sort of snuggle in front of their fireplace, and it's the perfect, these dishes, these stews, this pizza rustica, this hot chocolate, they're all perfect for a cold winter night to sit down, enjoy tickle your taste buds, and enjoy a performance of the Windsor Symphony Orchestra.
Mm. And food and eating is also very sociable. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how does this program or how does it work? Do you is it the music and then the chef explains the history, or how is it
So
set up?
the nuts and bolts are pretty clear. So what happens is, once you purchase the 7 concert series on January 14th, you can download all 7 to watch through March 31st. So you have 2.5 months to make all the dishes and see the concerts. Um, each episode comes with a 2 to 3 minute prep video, which is Rob teaching you how to make the dish along with the menu. Then once that's finished and you've made your dish, then you can watch the concert. And in the middle of the concert, Rob usually pops up for a 2 minute little fun fact, or fun sort of question that I have for him. But it's actually 2 videos. So the concert is about an hour in length. They range around an hour. But the prep video of the food is a separate video that'll be side by side on the website. So it's real easy to click on and find. And then you'll be able to watch Rob show you how to make the sort of trickier parts of the recipe, and then you've got the recipe to follow.
That's wonderful. And it's good that you did it separately, so you can make the dish and then maybe sit down and eat while listening to the music. Is that the
That was
idea?
the idea
Yeah.
completely, Petra. The idea was, how do we bring these together? Like, I can't even tell you the idea of like drinking the hot chocolate or enjoying some stew while you watch this piece being performed that's sort of the same inspiration and connects somehow. I think really sort of brings home this idea that, okay, let me say this. When I was at university, the very first year I was there, we all had to take a class called Art in Context, because we each came to the art school I went to, with our own art form, and we didn't understand the others. And what that did automatically was it historically put everything in context so that we could understand what was happening in ballet and what was happening in visual arts and in music, in each time frame. I think that really set in my mind this question of, how do you put things in context, and how do you build these concentric rings so that you not only have more experiences, but each experience that you have goes deeper and you find more value inside of it and more interest inside of it and more questions inside of it. And so that's really what this is about for me, is building context and putting it all together.
Well, that's great that you do that, because it's, I think art, every form of art has the same path, you know,
Yeah.
from coming from the classics and then building on the basics and then understanding the rest.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. So, okay, so people can now, do they have to subscribe to your newsletter, or how do they find this program?
It's even easier than that. You don't have to get our newsletter, although we'd love it if you did. All you have to do is go to windsorsymphony.com. And at windsorsymphony.com, under concerts, it'll say the music, the story, the food, which is what the series is called. The music, the story, the food. And you just subscribe. And the minute you subscribe, you'll get a password so that you and your family can enjoy at your household the concerts.
Okay.
And get started.
I'm so glad you made it a very simple name, because if you did it now in French, I wouldn't have been able to pronounce it.
Less is more, Petra. Less is always more.
I'm with you on that one. Okay, I will put the link anyway in the description.
Great.
And do that. Yeah.
Perfect.
Now, I just have to ask you before we say goodbye, is what is your wish for this year?
You know, my wish for this year is that it's a few things. One, that as we get through these incredible changes that have happened to all of us over the last 2 years, that we find a way to live together, experience together with openness and caring and love and safety and thoughtfulness and a real sense of thinking about others as we go through our day. And I think for me, biggest life lesson of the last 2 years. And so I hope for that more than anything. I also long for and wish for and can't wait for our live audiences to be able to come back and be comfortable with coming back. You know, we've got some audience members who love coming back right away and some who are still nervous about it. But I think the key factor here is really knowing that we care about each other, I think is enormously important, and thinking about others before yourself. And so I think that's what the pandemic has taught me. And I think that's what we need to do to get to the next level together.
Now, that's absolutely true. And I think also, I mean, just talking to you about this project that you're doing, and you said inspired by, you know, the pandemic, and you think so many things have come from this time.
Yeah, I agree completely.
But Robert, so lovely to talk to you. And I'm very interested in this. This is such a great project. And I hope there will be another one. And I hope there will be a South African dish in the next one.
I'll see what I can do, Petra. I'll do my best, I promise. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. No, it's a pleasure. Have a lovely afternoon.
All right. Thanks. You too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.